So at last Huramabi completed everything King Solomon had assigned him to make for the Temple of God. The 2 pillars, the bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 2 networks of interwoven chains that decorated the capitals, the 400 pomegranates that hung from the chains on the capitals, 2 rows of pomegranates for each of the chain networks that decorated the capitals on top of the pillars, the water carts holding the basins, the sea and the 12 oxen under it, the ash buckets, the shovels, the meat hooks, and all the related articles. Huramabi made all these things of burnished bronze for the temple of the Lord, just as King Solomon had directed. The king had them cast in clay molds in the Jordan Valley between Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon used such great quantities of bronze that its weight could not be determined. So, pretty much everything that's been described in the temple construction so far, Huramabi had something to do with the design of it. What's up, cool people? My name's Matt. Welcome back to our Bible study. Okay. So we're looking at 2 Chronicles chapter 4 now. Last chapter was the start of Solomon building the temple. Per Ezra's description, reminder, this is meant to be originally for the Israelite exiles as a way of kind of recapping things and saying, all right, here's how we got here. Probably with a bit of emphasis on like, all right, here's something bad that happened, and here's how it connected with disobeying God. And then like, okay, here's something good that happened, and how we followed God in that instance. And I guess there's some emphasis on the temple as well, because I think part of what Ezra had in mind, at least, was wanting to rebuild the temple. It had been destroyed by other kingdoms because of them getting taken over and all sorts of things like that. But, yeah. So we had kind of the general idea of the structure of the temple, about how large it was, the size of each room within it, and maybe a couple of things about decorations for it, but still, we've mostly covered just the framework of it. Now we're going to continue with more details on what is inside the temple, but not necessarily part of the main structure of it. So here we go. 2 Chronicles, chapter 4. Solomon also made a bronze altar 30 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 15 feet high. Then he cast a great round basin, 15 feet across from rim to rim, called the sea. It was 7.5 feet deep and about 45 feet in circumference. It was encircled just below its rim by 2 rows of figures that resembled oxen. There were about 6 oxen per foot, all the way around, and they were cast as part of the basin. The sea was placed on a base of 12 bronze oxen, all facing outward. 3 faced north, 3 faced west, 3 faced south, and 3 faced east, and the sea rested on them. The walls of the sea were about 3 inches thick, and its rim flared out like a cup, and resembled a water lily blossom. It could hold about 16,500 gallons of water. That's pretty big. Also, okay, so bronze altar, 30 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 15 feet high. That's like half the size of what we've read about so far, pretty much. Although I don't think it says that this was inside the temple exactly. It might have been just next to it. Also, so rather than Solomon, it might be read as Huramabi. Hebrew reads he, which, what he would it have been except Solomon? Solomon was the only he mentioned in the previous chapter. Huram-Abi, though, might have actually been, let me go back and look, might have actually been the one guy that, that was the one guy Hiram sent to help with, like, crafting all this stuff and doing all the details and whatnot. So, realistically, it might have actually been Huram-Abi doing it with some general guidance from Solomon. In any case, okay, so, bronze altar. So the Hebrew says it was 20 cubits long, 20 wide, and 10 high, which roughly equals the measurements we saw here. You can also see the rough meter equivalents in this note. But then we get to this thing called the sea. Great round basin, so like a very large pool, I guess you'd say. 7.5 feet deep, so pretty much deeper than just about anybody is tall. 45 feet in circumference. Circumference is like the whole circle around. Hebrew says 10 cubits across, 5 cubits deep, and 30 cubits in circumference. Now, 10 cubits across would be more like the diameter. So, 30 cubits in circumference might be sort of a rough estimate there. Then there's these oxen. There are about 6 oxen per foot all the way around. They were cast as part of the basin. And then for the base on which the sea sat, there were 12 bronze oxen, all facing away from the center, 3 each side. The walls of the sea were about 3 inches thick. Hebrew says a hand breadth, which is believed to be about 8 centimeters or 3 inches. It could hold about 16,500 gallons of water. Hebrew says 3,000 baths. So that's what they're basing their measurement on here, assuming certain, conversions. Anyway. Also mentions it flared out, so there was like sort of a lip at the top of this basin called the sea. Resembled a water lily blossom. That maybe there were some details like inside it that gave it that look, or I guess potentially on the outside as well. Anyway, okay, so talked about this altar and this basin called the sea. Then we move on to verse 6. He also made 10 smaller basins for washing the utensils for the burnt offerings. He set 5 on the south side and 5 on the north, but the priests washed themselves in the sea. He then cast 10 gold lampstands according to the specifications that had been given, and he put them in the temple. 5 were placed against the south wall, and 5 were placed against the north wall. He also built 10 tables and placed them in the temple, 5 along the south wall and 5 along the north wall. Then he molded 100 gold basins. More basins? Jeez. Maybe these were even smaller basins. Okay. So, you've got places for washing the utensils. But it says the priests washed themselves in the sea. So, that big basin that was just described as holding 16,500 gallons of water. That's where the priests would wash themselves to clean up before doing, like, the ceremonies and things. Or really performing any of the rituals, I'd imagine. Makes me wonder how often they changed out the water. So then there are 10 gold lampstands. Doesn't say what all each lampstand held, like whether it was just one candle each, or they might have been designed to hold a few candles. But either way, that was probably the main lighting in... And does it say it was in the most holy place? For where it says... it's somewhere within the temple. Okay, well... Not a big deal. Also, it mentions a bunch of this stuff being placed along the south wall and the north wall. Like, which means it would essentially be the side walls from the entrance. Because the entrance was either to the east or the west. I'm pretty sure it was the east. Okay. Not too much else I have to say on that. On to verse 9. He then built a courtyard for the priests, and also the large outer courtyard. He made doors for the courtyard entrances and overlaid them with bronze. The great bronze basin called the Sea was placed near the southeast corner of the temple. That explains where it was then. Huramabi also made the necessary wash basins, shovels, and bowls. So at last, Huramabi completed everything King Solomon had assigned him to make for the Temple of God. The 2 pillars, the bowl-shaped capitals on top of the pillars, the 2 networks of interwoven chains that decorated the capitals, the 400 pomegranates that hung from the chains on the capitals, 2 rows of pomegranates for each of the chain networks that decorated the capitals on top of the pillars, the water carts holding the basins, the sea and the 12 oxen under it, the ash buckets, the shovels, the meat hooks, and all the related articles. Huramabi made all these things of burnished bronze for the temple of the Lord, just as King Solomon had directed. The king had them cast in clay molds in the Jordan Valley between Succoth and Zarethan. Solomon used such great quantities of bronze that its weight could not be determined. The last chapter, it had mentioned how much gold was used in, like, overlaying the inside of the temple. This is like, there's so much bronze that was used, can't even weigh it. Too much. Not too much for what it was being used for, but too much to just even consider trying to weigh it all. So, pretty much everything that's been described in the temple construction so far, Huramabi had something to do with the design of it. So, so there's a courtyard for the priests and a large outer courtyard. So I guess this has me thinking it might be similar to how the tabernacle was. You had like a big tent for the main part of the tabernacle, but then also outside of that there were like a couple of courtyards beyond it for various purposes. Only certain people could really go into the tabernacle proper, I think. Definitely the most holy place in this case. Only the priests could go in there, period. And I imagine some of these courtyards could have been like, all right, well, if we're going to hold sort of a more general gathering, that'll be in like the outer courtyard. If we're making preparations for offerings and stuff, that might be in the inner courtyard. And anyway, But I'm kind of thinking out loud and somewhat, I don't know, making an educated guess, for lack of a better way to put it. Okay. So this thing called the sea was placed near the southeast corner of the temple. So I'm guessing, since it mentions that with the courtyards, it was outside of the temple. Which, if something like that is being placed outside the temple, that also means it's plenty reasonable to believe that that altar that was like half the size of the most holy place was also outside the temple in one of the courtyard areas. So that might also make sense for some of the offerings, because I think, if I'm remembering instructions for the tabernacle and other things correctly, there was like one altar inside the most holy place, which was, or at least one place where they like burned incense and such. And there was probably an altar outside the main part of the tabernacle and or the temple that was for kind of the more regular offerings for the people. But again, me just trying to remember details and what makes sense with all this. Okay. So anyway, we've had all this stuff that's been made for the temple. And now I'll read the rest of the chapter, starting with verse 19. Solomon also made all the furnishings for the temple of God: the gold altar, the tables for the bread of the presence, the lampstands and their lamps of solid gold, to burn in front of the most holy place as prescribed, the flower decorations, lamps, and tongs, all of the purest gold, the lamp snuffers, bowls, ladles, and incense burners, all of solid gold, the doors for the entrances to the most holy place, and the main room of the temple, overlaid with gold. So, yeah, again, lots of gold involved, lots of little details, and then, of course, there are the instruments used for the various things that the priests needed to do. Lampstands for lighting, of course. A table to place the bread of the presence, because that was a pretty important part of the display. But yeah, so there's at least most of what went like inside or around the temple that wasn't part of the main temple structure itself, but definitely had to do with the things that would happen in and around it, kind of the regular priestly duties. So yeah, I don't really have any other thoughts on any of this, so I suppose that'll do it for 2 Chronicles chapter 4. Okay, so last chapter we had the main temple structure. This chapter we had stuff that went inside the temple, as well as courtyards around it. And really, most of it was overseen in a way by Huram-Abi, the guy that King Hiram sent to help build the temple. But essentially, most of the temple building, or at least the recap of it from Ezra, is done at this point. But we'll see what comes up in the next chapters. So, as always, like and share if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell to get updates when I post new videos. Look down in the description for links to social media pages, as well as my supporter page and my Discord server. All sorts of good stuff like that down in there. And if you got any thoughts or questions, leave them down in the comments section below all of that. So that's it for now. Hope you're all doing well. Hopefully I'll see you soon for another video. Whatever the case is, till next time, stay cool, people.